Good morning and welcome to the Institute for the Fiduciary Standards 5th event of Fiduciary September, titled Our Professional Interests Are Not Aligned with Industry Concerns. My name is Darren Fogarty and I am the research analyst at the Institute. Today's event will focus on a particularly incisive chapter in the late Dick Wagner's book, Financial Planning 3.0. The chapter entitled, Who Are We? Casts a reflective and critical look over financial planners' relationship with the financial services industry. On the call, we have two panelists, Cheryl Holland and Dave Yeske, and our moderator, Evan Simonoff, to discuss Dick's work and lasting impression upon the financial planning profession. Cheryl Holland is president and founder of Abacus Planning Group, a holistic financial advisory firm in Columbia, South Carolina. Holland is a nationally recognized advisor who has made the top of lists such as Barron's Top Advisors, Barron's 100 Top Women Advisors, and NAPA's 30 Most Influential People. Her work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Journal of Financial Planning, and many other industry media outlets. Dave Yeske is managing director of Yeske Buie and a former chair of the Financial Planning Association. Yeske has been practicing financial planning since 1990 and has nearly 27 years of experience as a distinguished adjunct professor in Golden Gate University's Agino School of Business, where he directed the financial planning program. His work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, USA Today, and many others, including, of course, the Journal of Financial Planning, where he served as practitioner editor for almost 5 years. Evan Simonoff is editor-in-chief and editorial director, of Financial Advisor magazine, as well as editorial director of Private Wealth magazine. He spent more than 15 years as an editor and reporter covering the financial services industry. Evan is a widely recognized expert on personal finance and investments. Knut Rostad is the president and founder of the Institute for the Fiduciary Standard. Rostad formerly served as a regulatory and compliance officer at Rembert Pendleton Jackson, an RIA in Northern Virginia. He has authored dozens of articles, papers, and regulatory comment letters, is regularly cited in media, national, and industry outlets, and speaks frequently at industry conferences on fiduciary and compliance issues. We'll have time for Cheryl, Dave, and Evan to present, and we'll also have time for a moderated Q&A session. Please submit your questions to the chat, and if possible, we would like to let audience members ask the panelists their questions directly. We still ask that you submit those questions first, though, through the chat feature. There will be a recording of this event on the Institute's website shortly after it concludes. And with all that out of the way, I'd like to pass it on over to Knut Rostad to begin today's session. Knut?
Thank you, Darren, and thank you to our speakers here to talk about the topic of Dick Wagner and particularly his views were on as expressed in chapter 6 of his book, Financial Planning 3.0. I thought it would be relevant to start with a highlighted bio of Dick, since there may be more than a few individuals that are not as familiar with his work as we are on this panel. So that's where I'm going to start. And I went straight to his website, and I will read portions of that to provide this overview. Dick Wagner was a major thought leader in financial planning profession since moving away from the practice of law in 1982. Wagner began Worth Living LLC with the mission of focusing on relationships between humans and money. Wagner was a leader both politically and intellectually. He was on the board of directors of the Rocky Mountain chapter of the International Association of Financial Planning from 1984 to 1988, including service as president and chairman of the board. In 1989, he was appointed to the National Committee of the Institute of Certified Financial Planners and continued to serve as president of that organization in 1993. Along the various ways, he has served on countless committees and task force for financial planning associations and the CFP Board of Standards, including Financial Planning Association's Fiduciary Task Force in 2008 and the ICFP Retreat Dean in 1995. In 1989, Wagner wrote a seminal piece for the Journal of Financial Planning entitled To Think Like a CFP that remains a leading aspirational expression of the financial planning profession and its importance to the modern world. He has also been a excuse me, he was a regular contributor to Financial Advisor magazine for over 10 years. And finally, as we get down further in his bio, Wagner's service was recognized by his peers in 2003 when he received the P. Kemp Fane Jr. Award, distinguishing an individual who has made outstanding and contributions to financial planning profession. Finally, going to the last couple sentences on his bio, I was wondering whether this first sentence should be higher up on the bio in terms of understanding Dick Wagner. He graduated with honors from the College of Worcester, and I bet Dave knows this, in 1971 with a Bachelor's of Arts in Religion. 6 years later, he graduated from Lewis and Clark Law School and received the rights to use the CFP trademarks in 1987. So there is an overview of Dick Wagner, and now we'd like to sort of continue this discussion as more of a conversation back and forth. As Darren mentioned, he will be, he encourages the individuals to submit questions, and we can and he will pass them along to me as we proceed. I think a good place to begin in this discussion is for each of our speakers here to just talk for a minute about how you knew Dick Wagner. Cheryl, you want to begin?
Well, I probably knew Dick the least well of the group, but back in the day, there weren't thousands of us gathering. There were hundreds and sometimes dozens of us gathering at conferences, and Dick was always in the thick of it. And so if you ever wanted to sit down and have a rigorous conversation on any topic, religion to financial planning to the profession, Dick was your go-to person. He was, wherever we went, he was always surrounded by a covey of interested dialoguers. So he's a great grandfather of the profession. I like to think of myself as a grandmother. So that's how I know Dick.
Thank you. Dave?
Well, he was, I think of him almost as my professional father. I was studying to become a CFP in the late 80s, and at first it was just like an item to be ticked off my list as I prepared to open a financial advisory business. But studying for the CFP started to shift how I thought about this thing, and I'd almost become a supersaturate solution, and Dick's to think like a CFP was the thing that just crystallized what my vision for who I was going to be as a professional was when it appeared in the Journal in 1990. And then I went on to found the San Francisco Society of the ICFP, and Dick being president-elect and president in 92 and 93, I had opportunities to interact with him on a professional association basis, going to leadership conferences and so forth. And I have another story I'll save for later about Dick and how we formed a relationship. But it started out, first of all, by being inspired, and secondly, by through my active involvement with the ICFP, where Dick was a very powerful and driven leader.
Thank you. And Evan, as a professional observer of the world of financial planning.
Yes, I guess I first heard one of my reporters when I was editing Financial Planning magazine went to an ICFP retreat and came back and was doing a few stories, and she was quoting him extensively, and she just said that you should really get to know this guy. He's thinking big about this business. Everybody else is sort of thinking small ball, but he's an attorney. He came in with a somewhat different perspective. He really understands what a real profession should look like. And so I called him up. He became a good source. And when I started Financial Advisor with a few other people, in 2000, he had just left to start Worth Living because he wanted to focus on what the real meaning of financial planning was and taking the profession to another level. And I said, gee, would really like you to write for us. And he became a columnist once every other issue, every quarter or so. And he always had something interesting and provocative to say about how the business was evolving and where he thought it should go.
Thank you, Evan. Cheryl, I'm going to beat you out on this regard that I knew Dick even less than you knew Dick, in that we literally never met in person. I remember reaching out to him about 7 or 8 years ago, just as we were going with the Institute, and he responded immediately. He didn't know who I was, and he responded immediately. And I remember getting a phone call from him in the car. And I said, Dick, is somebody else driving? And but he was just very very generous with his comments and and offering his views. Anyway, so that's where I'm coming from. So I know him best, actually, through his book and through the columns he wrote for Evan over the years. So anyway, along those same lines, thinking about a firsthand anecdote that each of you had with Dick. Cheryl?
Yeah, I'm going to tie what I think is important about this conversation, the profession, to this anecdote. So when I read Dick's book, he mentions a gentleman, Harold Gooch, who actually was the reason I became a financial advisor. I heard Harold at a conference, and he said, one day, you in this room, we were all brokers, I was at Merrill Lynch, will provide advice for a fee, just like a CPA or an attorney does. And literally, the light bulb went off my head, and I quit my job a month later. Dick references Harold as his mentor. And so, but let me mention the Dick anecdote. So you think about all the way back to like 1980, where Dick, Harold was influencing those of us who were early in the profession. The last time I saw Dick was at a Next Gen conference of FPA in Dallas, Texas. And I was there to be one of the advisors, and Dick was just, there's the godfather. And once again, there he was, mentoring that next professional members in our profession who will go on to mentor the next generation. So literally in his last year of life, there he was, sitting around with a group of people all under 40, except maybe 3 of us. And so that notion that there's Harold Gooch, in the 80s, there's a thread of Dick, all as a profession, all the way to him mentoring new professionals. Very powerful to me.
Thank you. Dave?
That, first of all, that is so classically Dick through his whole life, as you say, Cheryl. Right to the end, he was a magnet for young people in the profession. It's in part, I think, because young people tend to be highly idealistic, and Dick was the ultimate of setting ideals. And I loved how every time someone would raise an issue or a problem with him, his retort would always be, "What are you going to do about it?" But the first opportunity I had to sort of deepen, as I said, starting in probably '92, I began a professional interactions with Dick. But the one that kind of like launched my personal connection to him was we were both attending the ICFP retreat at Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado Springs, and I found myself walking across this grassy quad towards the main lodge. I think to go to dinner, and I found myself walking shoulder to shoulder with Dick. And, we exchanged some pleasantries. And then finally, I just had to expose myself as the fanboy I was. And I said, Dick, I have to tell you something. To think like a CFP is probably the most powerful piece of, not just the most powerful, but the most important piece of writing in my life. It is the thing that crystallized who I was going to be as a professional and how I saw myself. And Dick sort of soaked it in. And then he turned to me and he said, "What are you doing for dinner?" And we went on to have dinner together. And the thing is it was, if you knew Dick, you knew that was not about my praising him. I mean, maybe a little bit, but it was about Dick saying, "Oh, wait, here's someone who wants to talk about something deeper. Here's someone who wants to actually go delve into the realm of ideas. I want to spend some time with him." And, that was the beginning of, how does it go at the end of Casablanca? The beginning of a beautiful relationship or something. But anyway.
Great. Evan?
No, I always thought that he would think about outside the box, which is a cliche, but he really did that. And he also could, he thought that money had to have a higher purpose than most advisors are just trying to get their clients to retirement and reach a certain goal, or they were. I think now that their clients are in retirement, a lot of what he's predicted would happen is happening in fits and starts. It's not all smooth, but people are realizing that there's a lot more to it than that. Part of it's a generational thing with the first generation of advisors and their clients. But he also, when he asked what was money really for, he thought about it from a big picture perspective. I mean, he thought, that you could have possibly just like academics have said there are different currency zones. I remember him doing articles on, should there be a currency zone for a retirement community, for a college community, things like that. I've often wondered the last few years with what we're going through, what he would think of MMT, because, people are, he looked at it from the political economic perspective, but he also looked at it from the perspective of an advisor who had worked with people in real life situations. And that's something that's often, something I'd be very curious to, if he were here, to listen to what he had to say, because he was a big picture thinker.
Thank you, Evan. Darren, do we have any questions coming in yet?
Not just yet.
Okay.
Oh, wait, actually we do. Well, we have one from Jacob Wagner that said, "Hey guys, thanks for doing this." So.
Hey, Jake.
All right, great. Now let's move on to chapter 6. And he starts chapter 6 in the book, Financial Planning 3.0, with the basic straightforward question, who are we? And he states the importance of this identity can't be overemphasized. And so I've got sort of two questions to start the conversation on this. So I'll do these separately because the second one is a little complicated. So why do each of you think that this was such a central question today?
Dave, why don't you start this time?
Sure. It was really a question that Dick had been chewing on for over 30 years. I mean, it was an issue that he raised into Think Like a CFP decades before. And it was a problem he never stopped chewing on because he knew it was central. That the whole question of identity is central to anything that any activity you're going to call a profession. There has to be a shared notion of what we do and why we do it, and there has to be a shared understanding of what our standards are, what our red lines are, the lines we won't cross. And so he never stopped working on that, and he recognized that this notion of identity can be continuously blurred. I mean, there is a financial services industry that spends, I actually don't know what the number is. I'm going to make something up and I'll bet I'll be in the ballpark, hundreds of millions of dollars a year trying to create images that appeal to potential customers, but that potentially blur the reality of those of us who are actually hewing to a client-centered, fiduciary-based advisory activity. And so Dick could see that it was an uphill battle, that if you were going to define who you are as a profession, you were fighting against a flood of money coming from what he called the industry, which was really about, they're product manufacturers. There's nothing wrong with being in the manufacturing business, but the distribution system for their manufacturing business masquerades as advice givers. And so that's where they put all their money because, honestly, people are desperate for advice. And they just don't know how to distinguish. And so this is why Dick spent 30 plus years chewing on this problem, because he knew it was at the center of our opportunity and our challenge to become a profession.
Thank you.
I'll just follow up and say this. Well, who are we? And when we know who we are, when we know that we are a professional, client-centered fiduciary financial advisor who puts their clients' best interests ahead of them every day and who is seeking lifelong learning to deliver excellence and advice, that makes our life easy. We don't have, you think about decision-making and all the research and decision-making. The fewer decisions you have to make, the easier your life is. And if that is a central focus of who we are as a profession, that makes my life easier. That makes the consumer's life easier because they know how to make a decision. Doesn't mean they don't hire other people in the financial services industry for a variety of reasons. It doesn't mean we don't interact and support in a deep and engaged community. But if we know who we are, if we have a very clear definition of who the profession is and who the professional is, everyone's life is simpler. And we all want that for ourselves. I don't want to wake up in the morning and think, well, what does it mean to be a mother? What does it mean to be a spouse? What does it mean to be a boss? What does it mean to be kind to others? The more clarity I have on all those things, the better I can do at each of those responsibilities I have. And we have to become a profession so that our clarity and simplicity is foremost for all of us and our clients, even more importantly.
Okay. Evan.
No, I'd say, just to echo what both Cheryl and Dave are saying, is that Dick realized faster than most people that the message that was being delivered by the CFP, typically fee-only RIA community, was very powerful, and that it was being noticed by the big financial services firms, which I remember being at a ICI conference, the mutual fund industry, in 2000, and someone from McKinsey pointed out to the whole audience how fast this segment was growing. And I remember, I think a lot of these people, they had very talented marketing people with big budgets, as Dave alluded to, and they probably looked at this business and said, what are their most compelling parts of their message? And let's take some of us, they can't put a trademark on it. Let's take some of that for ourselves. And I remember joking a few times with Dick that you eventually ended up with some of the giants like Merrill Lynch and Schwab having dueling advertisements when Merrill would focus on a client who retired and started a vineyard, and Schwab would have an advertisement with a client saying, "Do you really think I want a vineyard? You think that's the retirement idea?" And it became a little comical, but he sincerely thought that there was, a lot of this was really marketing fluff more than it was substance. And I did once see, I have not seen it much, but a publication Merrill Lynch does for advisors, and they did a profile of the retired actress Marsha Mason, who actually did have a vineyard in New Mexico, of all places. I don't know, and somehow I don't see New Mexico as a good place for a vineyard, but she seemed to be very happy, and I'm sure, things could have worked out for her, but some of this was, he did not feel that it was all, it was just market. It was mostly marketing. Even if someone at Merrill did help Marsha Mason go retire and launch her own vineyard, that's all nice and well, but.
And then I will just say they have great champagne from New Mexico vineyards, or sparkling wine. So that was a precursor.
Thank you, Evan. Now, as a follow-up to this sort of a question, in terms of in terms of general identity, I think about 3 years ago, the Institute did a random survey of CFPs on the issue of how they're describing themselves on their websites in terms of being fee only as opposed to not fee only. and we looked at several markets and looked at literally hundreds of their categories here. And what we found is that consistently in different states and different metro areas, it was only 12 to 15% who held themselves out as being fee only among the universe of CFPs. So I guess I think of that when I think of the next question in terms of if we were looking at a random sample of CFPs, what percentage do you believe would identify themselves as having no association, as Dick thought about it, as he talked about it, with the industry and being truly independent? And then what percentage of this random sample would also be either registered reps for a broker-dealer or an insurance company? So this is a different sort of a question, but I think leads into the next topic, which we have talking about in terms of Dick's views. Evan, you want to go first this time?
Yeah, I am. That's an interesting question. I know there's something like 15,000 or 13,000 registered SEC RIAs, but some of them have, dozens and dozens of advisors there. Now, how many are CFPs? I would, or fee only. I think, again, you'd have to break, Dave might know this because he's been active there, but I think if you lop it off, first of all, there are a lot of people who are CFPs who are not advisors. They got it because they were an advisor and they went into some other business. They went to work for a software company or a mutual fund company or something else. So I'm not sure I don't think they're getting paid by actual clients, but I would think the numbers, I would think it would be closer to 30, 40%. I don't know. Do you have any feel for that, Dave?
I don't. I mean, we'd have to get into definitional issues to really even try and research the question. But the one thing I have a really strong sense of is that the trend is in the right direction. If you go back 30 years, pretty much everybody was a CFP with the exception of maybe 1%, less than 1% of those practitioners had some kind of an association with industry. They had an association with an insurance company or a broker dealer or something like that. And you said maybe 30 or 40% are now declaring themselves to be independent and maybe independent RIA and operating under a fiduciary standard. I think that number sounds good to me. I mean, it sounds like probably about right. 30, 40, 50%. It's not 100%. It's not 90%, but it has grown, and we need to keep trying to grow it. Cheryl, you may have some access to the numbers. I don't know. I
don't know, Dave, and I guess at some point in time, I think that adds to the confusion to the public. And I'm thinking, yes, the trend is in the right direction. I guess the question I'd be curious about, and I don't know if we have this data, is how quickly is it going in the right direction? And I mean, I think that's what we feel the pressure about.
Right.
Is the longer we languish in this no man's land, is that going to damage the potential for us to be the profession we want to be? I think that's the question. Every year that goes by, is that a lost year or is that a gained year? And I hear you saying it's a gained year because the trend is in the right direction. But I'm curious if the miles per hour that we're going is enough. Are we twirling
is it fast enough? Yeah. And honestly, Cheryl, my take is it's not anywhere near fast enough. I think that we're fighting the good fight. We're fighting an important fight. We've had our victories along the way, large and small, but we're not winning the war fast enough. We're just not. And I mean, that's why we're all on this, all in this webinar, because we care about this stuff, because we know that it's I don't know. I've heard so many people over the years, compare us to like whatever, the rebels in Star Wars or something. You know, I think Bob Veras likes to do that. And, you know, and we're still in that position, and maybe we always will be. So I'm going to repeat myself, Cheryl. The trend, I said the trend is in the right direction. I'm with you 100%. I don't think, but it's not moving fast enough. It's just not, and it matters.
Dave, quick question.
And I guess the question I would ask too, and this is for another day, is I do think that people who go to the trouble, it's a tremendous amount of investment of time to get your CFP. I think the curiosity of how many of them are doing it to self-educate and how many of them are doing to sell a product, I do think that has changed dramatically.
Oh, so can I tell a story about that? And I'm going to try not to name names, although it's probably all ascertainable at some level. But back in the day when I was on the ICFP board and was on the executive committee, we were having a call with the CFP board executive committee, and this is where I'm not going to name names. And we thought we were showing up with a little gem. We just celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Institute, and Eileen Sharkey, there was a video at our last retreat celebrating the 25th anniversary, and on that video, among many other people, Eileen Sharkey was recorded saying, you know, some people say I have the CFP. I say I am a CFP. For her, it was about identity. It was about internalizing and making it part of her identity. To be a CFP, of course, that involves thinking like a CFP, but anyway, so we bring this to the CFP board's, executive committee at the time, thinking we're bringing them this little gem, and they were horrified, and they said, no, the future lies with those who are a CFP, not those with those who hold the CFP, not those who are a CFP, because they saw the only way to grow it at that time was to grow it among people for whom it was going to be a marketing imperative. And if you aimed at people who were going to internalize it and make it part of their identity, they felt you were looking at a much smaller universe. And so it was a real issue. And so anyway, so that's the dynamic tension all along, because the CFP is a wonderful standard. I mean, I believe in Kemp Fain's, one profession, one designation. We need to build this profession around a single, easily identified marker for competence and ethics. But we're still not without challenges and conflicts, even in that.
Quick question to both of you. You both have firms that are growing nicely. When you seek to recruit young advisors, are you able to find people? I would think, from all I've heard, the model resonates with young people, and who was you, if they get a job offer from Abacus or Yeski Bowie, who was their typical, who was they deciding between, you and who else? Is it another?
And then I'll answer that in a slightly different way that I think is exciting. Abacus, as Dave knows, because his daughter was an intern, was very early to have interns. I mean, we've been having interns for the whole 23 years we've been in existence, where we recruited students from the planning programs like Virginia Tech, Texas Tech, or even locally to come and experience working in a financial advisory firm. And it was like falling off the log. We had no trouble filling the coffers with interns. And sort of all of a sudden, I woke up this year and saying, oh, we're not a destination firm anymore, because there's so many magnificent financial planning firms out there that are like Dave's firm and my firm, and the students want to be there, and they know how to search out the ones in Washington, D.C. and Boston and go and be a part of that. And so what I would say is, not only do we look for young men and women and career changers who want to be professional, quote, financial advisors, and it's quite a competitive, they're just not even a competitive, we're not even interviewing the same people, would be my guess. Maybe right out of college, but not after that. So I would say it's a sea change in terms of where the human capital wants to go. Yeah,
it is. I agree with Cheryl completely. it's getting more competitive with every passing day. You know, it's actually hard to hire, and it's not hard to hire because everyone wants to go somewhere and be a salesperson. It's hard to hire because there are so many more independent financial planning firms out there, and that is what the young people want. At least the young people who are coming, especially the young people who are coming out of degree programs, whether it's a bachelor's program or a master's program, those people are coming out with such high aspirations and a belief and a desire to be part of a profession. And there are enough independent financial planning firms out there at this point that you know, we don't harm each other. In general, we try and be cooperative, but we're all accessing a pool of graduates that's never big enough. Maybe that's the other part of the equation, is that the number of degree programs and the number of graduates from degree programs has been growing steadily over the years, but it has not kept up with demand. It has not. So it's a challenge. But to your original, what I think was your original question, if I can recall, they are motivated to be working somewhere where they're going to be a true professional, a true advisor, where they're going to be in an advisory profession. That is what they're drawn to. And when they go to Abacus or when they go to Yesky Buoy or when they interview with us, you know, they often say, "Oh, I've been aware of your firm for a long time," or "I've read something Cheryl wrote in the Journal of Financial Planning," or "Dave, I saw you at a conference, and you know, you guys are doing financial planning the way I want to do financial planning." And there aren't enough of them. We need more.
That's the good news, is that you're where they want to go. The bad news is I'm hearing that, so you get out of a Virginia Tech or a Texas Tech, and these people have 4 or 5 each person has 4 or 5 good job offers. So they're kind of in the driver's seat.
I think that's another component of being a profession, right? You don't hire a doctor or a lawyer who, you know, didn't go to law school or go to, you know, medical school, and or have a master's in taxation to be, you know, at most viable accounting firm. So I just think if we think to the future, as Dave's alluding, educational requirements are a part of how you communicate with clarity what it means to be a profession in a particular industry.
Thank you each of you for your responses. I'd like to move on to the next sort of round of questions. A couple of questions to follow up on exactly what I'm hearing you talk about right now. Dick talks about confusion. He says, quote, "We have an extraordinary amount of confusion and obfuscation. People do not know what they will get, whether it's a product pitch or professional engagement." Then he says bluntly, of course, he said many things bluntly, this is our fault. Financial planning has failed to define its particular mission and purpose. Instead, we have encouraged confusion. Now, we've touched on this a bit so far, but a context for this to me has to do with what I hear in perhaps a broader sense about the investor confusion. And you know, I think this has become an art form, particularly over the last 10 or 15 years, with research telling us that investors are confused, and that implicitly, I believe that from a regulatory point of view, investors are blamed. Investors are blamed for not being smart enough to get what's being said, is one, but you know, explicitly we will hear the market is confusing. The market is confusing. So Dick is pretty direct in his thought about where the shortfall is. So was he correct in your view that the shortfall, the responsibility should be on financial planning itself for this confusion?
So a couple of thoughts. I agree with you completely. I don't think investors are stupid. I think investors are human, and they can be greedy and they can be fearful, but I don't think they're by and large stupid. And with the internet, there is lots of ways to find good basic information. I see people walking the door better equipped every single day. But here is the challenge. And I do think it's up to us to bring clarity as as the profession, as a group of CFPs. I'm on a board. I'm new to the board. I called the question about the endowment investments out of curiosity. So of course, the advisor, the brokerage firm came to the table pretty quickly, and they said, oh, now you have enough money to qualify to be on our fiduciary platform. I was very talented women who are CEOs, CFOs, and no one in the room blinked but me. Because that sounds good, right? But fiduciary and platform, as we know, are not two words that belong together. And so how do we educate when the subtlety of the miscommunication, and it was not done with malfeasance, it was we're excited about what they were bringing to us. They were equally uneducated as to the people in the room. So it is up to us to provide the clarity and consistency that is needed. And it's going to be tough, but I feel this way. I mean, I know the David Goliath, I feel more this way. I feel like the CFP profession is like the Gulf Stream and the Atlantic Ocean. We are small, but if we do things right, we can influence the weather all the way around the globe, right? That's how we see ourselves, as a quiet, silent, day in, day out impact. And we do not perceive ourselves that way, nor do we act that way.
Or we could be like Dr. Lawrence's butterfly flapping its wings over the Brazilian rainforest, right? Yeah. Causing hurricanes in Kansas. I do think the profession, however you define it, and honestly, I have an opinion about that, and I'm just going to, and I don't keep my opinions to myself, obviously. So the profession right now, and I don't mean to leave out the Institute, Knut, but I'm going to say the Institute is about fiduciary standard, not financial planning more broadly. Right. And so I'm going to say that the profession as it exists, in my mind, consists of some combination of FPA, NAPFA, and CFP board. There are no other players out there that are meaningfully defining the profession in a way that we would agree with. Cheryl has someone to add to that, right? Is that an agreement? Shake your head of the head, or
agree.
So that's it. That's the profession. So having defined it thus, yes, it is up to those three entities and those of us who are members of or licensees of or volunteers with those three entities to do everything we can, put energy into defining what financial planning is, defining it for the media, defining it for consumers, and getting the word out there in a way that sets appropriate expectations. The thing is that we're the only ones incented to set appropriate expectations. Others are not. As I'll say for the audience, I was talking to this group, before the broadcast began, and mentioning that I was involved in this so-called ethnography project years ago. It never got published, but I was working with Diane Lassus, and it involved kind of a secret chopper program where a bunch of secret shoppers were hired to go out and interview firms that were holding themselves out as financial planning firms, and then to actually be clients of those firms, let them prepare a financial plan. And then Diane and I and our staffs, we evaluated the reports of the interactions, we evaluated the actual financial plans that were created, and then we evaluated the final interactions that these secret shoppers had. And I have to tell you, they were not getting financial planning. They were being told they were getting financial planning, but it was not financial planning in any way that anyone on this panel or anyone in this meeting would consider financial planning. But they didn't know any better. They accepted it as such. And the thing that I found most terrifying was that all of these secret shoppers were, among the many questions they were asked, one was, would you refer this person to friends or relatives? And pretty much all of them, I think it was above 90%, said absolutely. And Diane and I are looking at each other and going, these people were being raped and pillaged. And they're like, yeah, I'd refer these advisors to my friends and family. And it was because they didn't know it. They didn't know what financial planning was, so they didn't know whether or not they were getting it. But the people that they were interacting with had some skills around building relationships. And so that's I don't know what that's, Dick talks about life planning in chapter 6, and that's a kind of a danger zone because life planning involves an understanding of the human dimension, relationships, being able to be facilitators of change, financial coaches, understanding human behavior and human motivation. And there's a dark side to that. It can be practiced as a dark art, in addition to being practiced as one of light and wellness. And so that even redoubles the imperative that the profession step up to the plate even more than it has, and define for everyone, public and the media, what it means to be in a functional financial planning relationship, what financial planning is, what your expectations should be. I always say this to clients. I always say, I'm setting expectations that I want you to hold me accountable for. I mean, really, if you feel we've fallen short anywhere where we've set an expectation, I'm going to take another 15 seconds. I once pulled up to a Four Seasons late at night after a long flight, and they greeted me at the door, and they said, I'm sorry, the garage is full. You're going to have to park your own car. You can't have valet parking. And I said, I don't think so. And I dropped my keys in his hand, and I walked into the desk, and I said, you know what? I'd be staying at a Best Western if I wanted to park my own car. Well, that makes me sound like a prima donna, I know. But the real thing is, the reason I was so wound up is because they had violated my expectations. But the worst part was they had violated expectations that they themselves had planted in my head. Well, I think I want to challenge all of us in the profession to go out there and set some high expectations in the minds of the public that will challenge us to live up to, and then live up to them.
Well, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, I've heard of people with expectations at Four Seasons, or, well, a client, someone with an empty tube of toothpaste. They're there for 4 days, and the chambermaid, replaces the same brand of Colgate. So if they couldn't park your car, that'd be pretty. That's sort of.
I just have to say in their defense, they did good recovery. First of all, that night they said, fine, we'll park your car. You'll have to go collect it yourself. And then at 9 a.m. the next morning, I got a call from the front desk saying, Mr. Yeske, we apologize so much. You will not have to collect your own car. You just let us know whenever you want it. We'll bring it to you. And then 10 minutes after that, a giant thing of chocolate and fruit showed up at the room. And I mean, someone realized they had violated the expectations they themselves had set, and they went into a recovery mode. But the thing is, expectations could be powerful, and the public doesn't always have the appropriate expectations when they think of the phrase financial planning.
Well, what you highlighted there was, I mean, none of these people in the secret shopper survey were doing financial planning, but most of the customers were pretty happy. So, yeah.
In the moment, because they knew how to build relationships.
Yeah.
Then to follow up this piece of the question, if there's a sense that it is financial planning's responsibility to address the confusion, any one or two things top of mind of what financial planning, as Dave, as you described, what entities are responsible for financial planning, what they should be doing if they're not doing it, and are there one or two barriers that you see that that would hinder doing what those entities should be doing?
I've been talking so much, I'm going to let Cheryl go, and she's been so deeply involved in all of the organizations, including maybe especially NAPFA. I know she has deep thoughts about this.
Well, so I think you're asking a great question, because I don't think we actually talk and think about this enough. I think about this individually. Our firm's BHAG, our Big Hairy Audacious Goal, is to accelerate the professionalization of the profession. Like, that's what we think about all the time, and we do things like that all the time. But I think three things. One is for academic institutions to continue to grow, and how might we support this the methodology by which we are a profession. You know, when Dave and I started, we were street taught. You know, the bill being an article of 4% hadn't even been published. There was no argument around it. So this whole notion of how might NAPA, FPA, CFP, whomever, you know, provide support to the academic institutions to create even more methodology that's academically based. I think what we're seeing is this cohort of young men and women coming into the profession, and they are not going to go backwards. If once you've been a fiduciary, you are going to rarely change. So how, and everyone's talking about how do we support that progression to get more in the pipeline, and how do we nurture them every step of the way as a professional from day one. So I think we think about that from their technical and their soft skill perspective, but I don't know how much thought we've given to the professional, you know, progression. What does it mean to be a professional? And then I think, we've talked about this briefly before, how might we have these conversations in the public will beyond a webinar? You know, what kinds of platforms could we have these conversations at an FPA conference, at an APFA conference, where we have 2 or 3 people maybe who have differing perspectives on this talk with the audience, so there's energy around the conversation. Because so far it's just happened organically. It has not happened through beyond Dick's constant writing and counseling, really. There has not been very much directional push from within the profession. So that would be 3 thoughts for me. Dave, I don't know what you would add, and where you, I mean, I put myself amiss for doing it solo and not as a cohort.
Well, I think one of the things we need to do is, first of all, yes, I agree with you, Cheryl. No legitimate profession doesn't have deep roots in academia. You know, the worlds of theory and practice have to be blended, and I'm all about evidence-based financial planning and empirically validating our best practices, and you really need an academic component to do that and to prepare future practitioners as well. But I think in terms of what we could do as individuals, but maybe most importantly, as part of the profession, so in our engagement with those organizations that leverage our individual efforts, and that's NAPA, FPA, and CFP board, we need to look to the next level of organizations that leverage us, and really the media is a big part of that. And of course, Evan, you're part of that media, but your media focused on reflecting back to the profession. We need to harness the media that's focused on the public at large. I think of Ron Lieber of the New York Times, who years ago he was at a FPA conference. He was actually on a panel with Elisa, and I can't remember everything the panel discussed, but I do remember at one point, Ron, who had just recently started to really understand who we were, those of us who were, you know, thinking of ourselves and trying to conduct ourselves like true professionals, he said, what is this with the secret society of real financial planners? You know, no, it's the secret society of real financial planners because no one in the public can actually find the real financial planner. And he's gone on in the intervening years to write again and again of his experiences with his own financial planner in a way that really conveys the kinds of expectations you should have of that relationship. And we need a lot more. We need a lot more Ron Liebers out there helping to reveal the secrets of the secret society of real financial planners.
Thank you, Dave.
I remember Ron Lieber from, I did a story for Fortune in the late 90s, and he was just out of college. They put him as the fact checker on the story. And I remember he was, because back then they were so big, they had like 2 fact checkers for every story. And he was a sharp, funny kid. He really was. And
Thank you.
I just put a plug in for the Institute here too. I mean, Dave, I do think Canute writes, you know, broadly and deeply on the fiduciary aspect of our profession. And I think you and I would agree that's core and central.
Yes.
You know, we
100%.
don't have a wake up, you know, doctors first do no harm. You know, we don't have sort of a guiding, but if we did, in my mind, fiduciary would be in that phrase.
Oh, you know, and Cheryl, that's so, I'm sorry.
We're fighting on many fronts, a good fight.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, because you know, we talk about fiduciary meaning putting your client's interest first. But as we all know, and as Knut really knows, that is, in a way, that's too simplistic. You have to tease out all the nuance of that. And that's where organizations like the Institute play such a critical role. So thank you for that corrective, because I completely agree with you.
Well, listen, thank you both for that. And there's no question in my mind that simply saying that we're going to put the best interests of the clients first falls short. And, one way that we have dealt with that is we come up with our 10 practices that are described in, 4 or 5 pages, as opposed to 700 pages or 1,000 pages, which is how regulators seem to approach this sort of thing. So that is part of what we've tried to do. And one of the things that I hear, and then I'll stop, from both of you is a point which I have not made. Which I've not made clear from what I've said about Dick, but one of the things he said was to say that there needs to be more energy and more involvement by the individual practitioners in this effort to move us in the right direction. And this is his political activism side coming out on some level. To join his intellectual activism, but anyway, that was a point that he also made that I think is relevant. So,
well, and I just have to jump in and repeat something I said a little while ago, and that is, I don't think I ever saw Dick in an informal gathering, with engaging other practitioners, especially younger ones, in deep thought about the nature of profession and our professional responsibilities, without him at some point saying to someone or everyone, now what are you going to do about it? He really did believe in individual responsibility and all of us being part of defining our community and our community standards.
Dave, I'm going to end with saying, we've had this conversation. I know you do a lot, but has this inspired you to do one more thing? I'm just curious. And if it has, what's that one more thing?
God, I'm trying to do fewer things these days, and I keep doing more.
It's okay too.
I think the one more thing is this. One of the various hats I wear is as program director at Golden Gate University, and to the degree I've been able to influence the structure of the programs that we offer and the content of the individual classes that are being taught. I've done some of this, but I really think I have a responsibility to create more of a student community around the idea of professionalism, even though it's threaded through all the different courses in one way or another. I think it deserves to be a thing unto itself. I think I need to make sure that all my students know about the Institute of Fiduciary Studies, for example. And I think I probably need to create forums and opportunities for the learners in our program to come together, not just to think about the various knowledge domains and not to think about the strategic way you integrate them as a practitioner, blah, blah, blah. Those things all matter, but to actually create forums to allow them to feel like they're part of a larger dialogue within the profession. And so, damn it, Cheryl. Damn you.
Thank you, Dave. Let me just take 15 seconds, because you reminded me, in accordance with this webinar, the Institute has reissued a PDF copy of Dick's Chapter 6. It's on our website. And so one way, and I suspect you already have your students, to the extent you can, read his book, but we just focused on Chapter 6, and it's available and for you and others to use as you see fit. So anyway, we are at the top of the hour. Evan, you have any last thoughts?
I just thought, I was looking over some things in Chapter 6, and Dick was always challenging not only the whole business, but the people who were in his segment of the business to be aware of their own. We all have biases, and we need sort of to check them at the door. And Cheryl mentioned the Hippocratic Oath, and I just recall him saying once, if you go to a surgeon for a general physical, you're probably going to end up with a lot of scars and stitches. And the person just sees that's the way they see the answer to every problem. And, you know, is more holistic professionals, this business does, especially as more and more people are specializing and gets bigger, people, I think there is something of a need to remember that you know, you've got your own perspective and that is fine, and we all do, but you need to remember that the client, it's really all about the client. You know, he would often talk about some of our writers who thought the goal of a client should be to amass as much money as possible. And well, he had a couple of very well thought of writers who wrote that, and he said, that's up to the client. That's not up to the advisor. And I think that's, you know, if there's one thing that I'd like to add, it's to remember, ultimately, it's the client's money and the client's goals in life, and it's the advisor's job sort of to tease that out of them, because a lot of people are so busy with their day-to-day lives, they don't really think about what they want, and it's probably not a vineyard. But yeah, that would be my final thoughts.
That is, I think, a great final thought, Evan. I want to thank Cheryl and thank Dave. And we have not gotten any questions. That must be because everybody's been enthralled with the wisdom that they've heard on the webinar. They didn't have time to formulate questions. But if we do get any questions come in, I'll pass them along and provide you an opportunity to respond to them. So again, thank you one and all for joining us. And finally, happy Fiduciary September to each of you.
Yeah. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.